Now, this is a topic that comes up a lot for me. Lately, there's been a couple different guys I've just had this discussion with, and they're trying to push bad information and trying to say, oh, well, this is superior to this, when reality facts don't really go with that. And so it's one of those things I wanted to address it in a video and show you guys the difference on, what is more important, shot placement or bullet construction and design. Now, real quick before we get into this video, I know I've been off grid for quite a bit with the ballistic gel tests. The reason being was hunting season. Again, hunting takes priority with traveling and everything. It's hard to get these gel tests in, and I'm working on somebody else's schedule because I shoot at their place. And then there was, Christmas, etc., and got sick. So I ended up having COVID, was sick for a few weeks, literally a few weeks. So that really knocked me out on not being able to do it. So we're going to get back into it. I should have these videos up pretty soon if everything goes to plan. We got a nice little lineup here for this next segment. So we have the tipped Game Kings, which is something a lot of people use. These are going to be in 223. A lot of these guys are looking at for varmint, and again, it's going to show you the same thing as far as the type of performance you're going to get. Then we have the new Barnes, these match burners. Never used them, know a couple people that have, but it's one that I get a ton of requests for. And lastly, the DRT terminal shock. Now this is one that has been on the list for a long time. I've actually got quite a few requests because of the curiosity around it. This is a non-lead option, a copper projectile, monolithics, whatever you want to call them. And this one is designed completely different than any other monolithic out there. So it's one of those things that I'm anxious to try it. I've had some good conversations with the owner trying to figure everything out of what makes this different, etc. I've got a couple guys that I know that are experts in the field, and they say this is the best monolithic out there. I'm very intrigued. Again, there's marketing and there's reality. And so I'm hoping those two are going to mesh up, and I'll actually have something to recommend to those people that are in like California and places where they don't allow lead. So we're going to plug through all that. I'm not going to give you any secrets or, spoilers on the video. Besides, I'm testing this in the video. I'll break everything down for you, but let's get started. Now let's start off with shot placement. Why is shot placement important? Well, quite simply, if you don't hit where you're supposed to, it's not going to destroy the organs. If you're going for that chest cavity, those vital organs, if you don't hit that, guess what? You're not going to damage the heart, the lungs, etc. So it's not going to be as lethal of a kill. It's not going to be fast. If you gut shot it, it's going to be a long, slow, painful death. You're either going to lose it, find it, and the meat could be spoiled depending on how long it takes, because there's not a lot of blood in the guts itself. They're also elastic, so they stretch, unlike the heart and the lungs. So it's just, you need to get on the spot. Again, shot placement is very, very critical. I can't underplay how important it is that you get it on the right spot. So depending on the animal is going to depend on how large the target that is, or whether you're doing a head shot, a neck shot, high shoulder, just behind the shoulder vitals. And so your ability to place that bullet there is going to be dependent on how effective you are as far as getting that round on target and into those vitals or the brain or whatever you need to, and getting that animal down. Now, for bad bullets, shot placement is absolutely critical. And I'm going to explain it why in this next part. Now let's dive into why bullet construction and design is important. Now, I talked about bad bullets. Here's the thing. If that bullet is bad, if it does not perform, if it does not expand wide, if it does not crush tissue, if it doesn't get that mass surface contact and give you that temporary wound cavity and that nice damage, then it's not doing you any favors. So if that bullet fails to expand and pencils through, you're not getting a lot of damage, and that can result in wounded animals even with a good shot of it just not causing damage and blowing through. I mean, I've seen multiple animals where they've been hit in the neck and it didn't actually impact the bone because the bullet didn't perform correctly. It didn't cause sufficient damage for that to bleed out. What has happened is there was enough energy transferred that it basically knocked it out. Just like punching somebody in the head, they go out and then they wake up. It's basically what happened. So you can kill with an impact to the neck without actually hitting the bone, but there's got to be sufficient trauma. Now, there's going to be enough energy to put the animal down, but it needs to have significant blood loss in order to have that animal expire before it can recover. And that's what a lot of people have happen is they'll use crappy bullets. They shoot an animal, it goes through the neck, doesn't impact the bone and sever that brainstem. It knocks it to the ground unconscious for a little bit, and then it wakes up and runs off. And I've seen that a ton of times, and people just don't understand. The neck, especially depending on animals like bears and stuff, can be really, really tricky just because of the fur, and you're trying to judge where exactly it's at. So, analogy I use is simply arrows, because arrows are very, very similar in far a lot of how they work, and just bear with me on this. If you take a practice tip, which doesn't have any blades on it, and you can see from this, now, was that going to be a fatal shot? No, that's a little bit on the low side, but what you can see is there's really no damage. It's just stuck in there, and that can happen with a crappy bullet. You're not going to get a bunch of trauma. It's just going to go through, and just like an arrow with a practice tip, it's really not going to cause damage. I've seen deer shot through vitals with a practice tip by a poacher, and it walked around with it. I mean, you can see there's tons of deers, even with some broadheads. If those broadheads fail, you can see them walking around and have arrows in them, and even impact sometimes to the head. I mean, and bullets can do the same thing. I've seen deer hit in the head and walk off because they either missed, it ricocheted off. I've even seen it where it was hit, but it didn't touch the brainstem. There wasn't an energy dump, so it didn't canoe that head with those 2 points of contact. I mean, it's crazy we've seen. I've seen it with hogs. It's one of those things that bullet performance critical. Even though you place that bullet where it needs to go, it can, if that bullet doesn't perform, it's not going to aid you, and it can end up with a wounded animal. But back to the arrows. So with arrows, if you have that nice broadhead, what's going to happen? It's going to hit, it's going to go through, it's going to cut everything in there, cause massive trauma. Shot placement is very critical with bows, but let's say it goes through the heart, it has that nice wide cutting, it's going to cause a lot of blood loss. It's going to cause that heart or lungs to be pumping, and it's causing wider damage versus just the diameter of the arrow, and so it's far, far more lethal. You know, if you ask anybody that's going to archery hunt, nobody is going to recommend, well, anybody with any common sense is going to recommend that you use a practice tip to hunt deer. They're going to tell you get a good broadhead that's got nice sharp blades and it's going to cut and do a good job. Now, anybody with common sense in the archery department is going to tell you that. The problem is when we get over to the bullet side, people don't understand different bullets and how they work. And so they will recommend bullets that don't perform well because they think it's a bullet. Oh, it's just going to do whatever. It's going to take care of business. Not actually the case. Now, another benefit of bullet construction and design is forgiveness. So if you have a bullet that's designed really well, like the TMKs, the Burger Hybrids, AMAX, ELD Match, A-tips, I mean, there's several different bullets out there. If you get a good projectile like that that's going to open up wide and it's going to dump massive amounts of energy, it's going to cause a lot of trauma. And not only are you going to get that wider trauma from that hydraulic shock, if you're up in the 2200 and plus range with good performance, where it's going to tear, and effectively you're taking your temporary wound cavity and creating a permanent wound cavity. And so it's a stretching beyond the elasticity point of that media and organs. And what's happening is it's just tearing. That's where you're going to see in gel where you have a wound cavity that's 2, 3, 4, 5 times larger than the projectile itself. And that is from just absolute destruction. Now, if you get under 2,200 feet per second with hydrostatic shock, your permanent wound cavity is going to be around the size of the bullet diameter of its max expansion or slightly larger. So what does that mean? Guess what? Shot forgiveness, because everybody talks about that, shot forgiveness is directly going to be from bullet construction. So, if you're just aiming for the whole vitals and you place it center and in the lungs with hydraulic shock with a good enough transition of energy, it's going to obliterate everything, including the heart. So you don't even have to hit the heart and it can destroy the heart. So, you're going to get massive trauma with those good bullets. And it's going to give you a lot of shot placement forgiveness in case something does happen. Now, everybody preaches, oh, well, and this is something that comes up. People say, oh, well, you just can't shoot. It's not that I can't place it where it needs. This is addressed at I'm not trying to teach myself or educate myself on this. I'm trying to help others. And everybody's got a different range. So these have to be addressed at everybody as a whole, not specifically at one group. Now let's talk about, now that we've looked at both the shot placement and the bullet construction, which one's more important? Shot placement or the bullet construction and design? It's the bullet. The bullet not only is going to dictate your external ballistics, and that helps with your ability to place that round exactly where you need with your BC, which is ballistic coefficient. It's a number that they associate with how well that bullet travels through the air, how well it deflects wind, etc. But that bullet, if you have a bad bullet, like I've said, it doesn't matter if you hit it right in the right place. I have seen animals multiple times with bullets get hit in the right place and not die. And even with good broadheads, I've seen it. Strange things happen. Great example of this is actually going back to bows. I watch a lot of Bone Collector, Realtree, etc. And T-Bone Turner and Michael Waddell down in Mexico had a hunt that is just prime example for why, things can go wrong. And, even with good shot placement. T-Bone was set up in a ground blind, had a really nice buck come by, and he center punched that thing exactly where it should have gone, right through the vitals. Good broadhead, it runs off, and Michael's over a mile or two away, something like that, and he's in his blind. And later that day, a big buck walks in, and he looks at it and goes, that kind of looks like it's been shot. So he shoots that buck too, right by where the other one was. It runs off, it dies. They start examining it. Come to find out, it was the same buck. So that was with a good blade. Again, I don't know how it survived because it had blood. It even had an open hole in the side. But it was walking around like it wasn't even injured. Now, who knows why, but that was prime shot placement. And that deer, when it went, clear over to Michael, was still on its feet. It looked like, if you didn't see the hole, you would never tell that it had been shot. It's strange how it works. And, I talked about neck shots. I've seen that. Actually, my last buck actually had a bullet through the neck. I found an old wound of a bullet going through its neck prior to me shooting it. So it's, it's one of those things that happens. And I've seen a lot of animals get shot with guns. And, the thing is, I see a lot of guys with bad bullets, and they hit them, and then they go down there, they don't find any blood, and then they're like, oh, I just missed. Well, did they miss? A lot of times, no. They just aren't using good bullets, and so they're not getting a good transition of energy. So it doesn't matter whether you got it in there or not. It's not doing a good job. If you're going for just the lungs, we're talking about a traumatic pneumothorax, which is a collapsed lung. And what happens is it's from a puncture, whether it's a gunshot, a knife, etc., or some foreign object. But what happens is those lungs get punctured. So if your projectile doesn't expand and simply pencils through, you're having a small hole on either side. Now, what happens with a collapsed lung is there's a hole for air to escape. So as it breathes in and it breathes out, that air is escaping and filling the void of the chest cavity around the lungs. Now, when that happens, it prevents it from expanding. And so as it keeps breathing out, more air is expanding around in that cavity, around the lungs, and it continually goes down until it collapses. Now, if you have a very small hole with not a lot of trauma in there, it's going to be a very slow process. So even though you placed it exactly where you wanted it in the lungs, it's still going to result in not a lot of blood loss, a very long track job, unless you just for some reason get lucky, but it's not going to aid you. So that's where, guys are saying, oh, I want 2 holes and I want a blood trail. Yeah, because they're using crappy bullets instead of using good bullets, and they don't have to worry about that because it's going to either drop on the spot or it's not going to go very far. But construction dictates how it performs. That construction and design is going to dictate how it flies through the air. It's going to for the external ballistics, it's going to dictate the terminal ballistics, what happens with that animal. I mean, it's vitally, vitally important. Here's the doe with the 110 A-tips out of my 6 Creedmoor. I did a high shoulder shot on it. You can see the shoulder, barely any damage. You can see in the chest cavity, though, that it absolutely obliterated everything in there. It was mush. It did a phenomenal job inside. And that's what a good projectile is going to do, instead of you having a whole group of organs and either the lungs or the heart has a hole through it. So not only the effectiveness of it, but that's what translates to a good, quick, clean kill. Without damage, you're not going to get killed. That's something I hear all the time with so-called meat hunters. And they talk about, oh, this bullet caused too much damage. Okay, meat damage, if you're going to have any hope of ethics, you're going to have some meat damage. The illusion that you can have little to no meat damage whatsoever and not lose anything, but still get good terminal performance, is a lie. If anybody ever tells you that, they are lying to you. Plain and simple. That's marketing BS. That's misinformation. That's lying, because it's physically impossible. Are you going to have a little bit of meat damage? Yes, but it's not a whole lot. But you're going to have some if you're getting any type of good terminal ballistics. And again, that's what makes an ethical kill, that quick, clean kill. That projectile that doesn't perform well and barely opens up or doesn't, or it sheds petals and then just simply sends the rest of that projectile through that shaft, isn't going to give you good performance. It's going to be very minimal. It's a terrible idea to get bad performing bolts. So get a good bullet. It's going to make all the difference in the world. So not only when you hit dead on is it going to give you superior performance, faster kills, but it's also going to aid. There was a guy I know that just this last season shot a deer, and just messed up on it. Ended up with a bad shot where it was right at where the guts meet and the liver. Now, with a bad performing bullet, that would have been a terrible shot. It would have probably nicked the liver and had some guts in there, and it wouldn't have really done anything. Ultimately, could have expired, yes, but it would have been very long and painful. However, he was using a good projectile, ELD match to be specific, and what happened is even though he made that bad shot, the temporary wound cavity, that hydraulic shock, and that permanent wound cavity from the bullet was large enough that it still obliterated the lungs. So it collapsed those lungs fully, and that animal died within a matter of feet. And so even with bad shot placement, it's what saved him. I mean, again, I can't stress enough. People can say bullet placement's everything, and that's the most important. I call BS. I mean, if you're using a crappy bullet that you don't get good performance with, then yeah, shot placement is your best friend just because you're using a crappy bullet. But if you're using a good bullet, shot placement, it just falls behind. And even with the bad ones, toss the bad bullets. Get rid of those crap and get a good bullet that's going to give you really good performance. The last thing you want to be is sitting there stressing out trying to find an animal why the guy that uses too much is happy eating chest freezers full, because he got a quick ethical kill and the other person got a crappy bullet trying to save a few ounces of meat and ends up losing animals, wounding them, long track jobs, long suffering animals. So a resounding yes, bullets are everything. I don't care what anybody else says, the bullet is the king of all ballistics. Just plain and simple, external ballistics and terminal ballistics. It is absolutely the most important. In conclusion, do your research. Find the good bullets. Stop listening to all this misinformation out there. There's a ton. The internet is just crammed with bad information that people that don't actually know what they're talking about, and they think, oh, well, I've killed so many animals, I know what I'm talking about. Well, to address that real quick, now everybody knows me for my analogy, so I'm going to do another one. Let's look at driving a car. How many people drive a car every single day? Well, does driving a car and knowing how to get to point A to point B, does that make you a mechanic or an engineer? Absolutely not. Does driving a car mean that you know how every little piece of that works? No. So just because you're successful or good at driving doesn't mean that you understand everything that goes into it. That is separate knowledge that you have to go out and achieve. And people, they just don't understand that. It's the same thing with hunting and ballistics. I know tons of people. I was one of them at one point. It's not hard to kill. Everybody's already done everything for you. You just go pick a bullet, and as long as you can hit it in the vitals and you have decent performance, it's going to die. But that doesn't mean you understand everything that's going into there. So, people use their kills, oh, I've been hunting 50 years and killed hundreds of animals. Okay, good for you. That doesn't mean you're an expert in terminal ballistics or bullet construction. Again, that's something you have to dive into. I highly recommend that you guys do. And do it from good sources. Sources that give you good examples and show you exactly what we're talking about. Nathan Foster is a phenomenal source for that. He has the largest collection of different animals from around the world and different bullets right at your fingertips. I'll put the link to his website below. There's an incredible amount of good data in there. A very, very experienced and professional guy. Again, he is hands down the top expert. If you want to know a lot, look at that. And there's other ones that you can look at to look at different stuff. I'll put some articles and stuff in the description below where you can read up on terminal ballistics and bullets. But it's one of those things that dive into that. Don't just listen to some guy on the internet. Go to good sources and find out. So again, do your research. If you guys have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I'll try to get you guys squared away, helped out if you have questions on different bullets. And as always, in this quest to show you guys how different bullets perform, their limitations, etc., I'm going to keep plugging away with the ballistics gel and, try to build this nice database and continue with the real terminal ballistic videos, which are showing you guys the real life effects of that terminal ballistics on different animals. So thanks for the support. We've had an incredible amount of new subscribers lately and views. Thank you guys for that. I really appreciate it. Hope you're enjoying the content. Everybody be safe out there. Happy hunting.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notification bell so you won't miss out on any future video. And happy hunting!